Urgent. Hundreds of drones are heading straight for Minsk. Madyar pressed the button. Lukashenko is already packing his bags after hearing the news. Ukraine's army will enter Belarus and more. Truth's moment is here. Front lines changed in a day. The boiling lava of Ukrainian retribution sweeps away everything in its path. Shock the defense of Moscow. Russian rear lines are shredded. Ukrainian forces cleared the security zone. Crimean hell has engulfed Putin completely. It's impossible to hide. A powerful operation by our forces. The first explosion has thundered. The battle for Kaliningrad has begun. Germany and the Netherlands were the first to play their trump cards. NATO's iron fist is looming over Russia. All this and more in our episode of Hotspot. Unprecedented. Kiev's iron birds are heading for Minsk. 500 key targets will be incinerated shortly. The Ukrainian armed forces will enter Belarus unannounced. The coup of the century is knocking on Lukashenko's door right at this very moment. Watch for all the details.
A new argument for Lukashenko not to get involved in the war against Ukraine. The first 500 military targets in Belarus are already known and identified. If the Ukrainian armed forces see that a new invasion from the north is unavoidable, Kyiv will launch a preemptive strike first, destroying the offensive potential of what would then be the enemy. Such a sensational statement was made by the head of the Unmanned Systems Forces, Robert Madyar Brody. At the same time, these remarks coincided with the visit of Belarusian opposition leader Sviatlana Tsikhanouskaya to Kyiv. As it turned out, she is also aware of Lukashenko's plans and is ready to help.
On the territory of Belarus, they are actively constructing, let's say, specific types of military infrastructure that shouldn't be there if the country is not preparing for a major escalation. And we are consistently sharing all of this information with our international partners.
At the same time, the list of 500 targets was clearly not compiled just yesterday. According to analysts, they became legitimate targets from the moment they started working for Russia. But so far, Ukraine has not responded. However, if not only the Belarusian military-industrial complex but also the army joins the Russians, a strike will be delivered immediately.
It is absolutely fair that legitimate military targets can also include the integral manufacturing plant located in the center of Minsk, which produces microchips for all the missiles that directly arrive, as well as the factories that produce and sell high-end optics for targeting, including for artillery, which are installed there on modern T-90 main battle tanks, and so on. And there are a lot more that could be listed here.
Many targets, analysts believe, were revealed during the recent exercises conducted by official Minsk under Moscow's auspices. The number of targets also increased after Russian nuclear weapons were transferred to Belarus.
We are observing certain military activity in Belarus. This is confirmed by the recent military training exercises as well, which specifically featured the potential use of nuclear weapons, what Moscow officially characterizes as so-called nuclear deterrence. And it is increasingly evident that the nuclear component in particular, especially the possibility of launching long-range strikes and the potential deployment of more Iskander missiles on Belarusian territory, presents significant and direct threats not just to Ukraine but to the broader region.
At the same time, the European military community is also aware of the threat from Belarus. Of course, they don't openly discuss the list of targets there, but it's likely that in the event of aggression from Minsk, retaliatory strikes would come not only from Ukraine but also from our partners.
It is important to understand that if an attack is launched from Belarusian territory, or if such attacks are being prepared, there will be retaliatory drone strikes, counterattacks, including by defense forces, and possibly by NATO forces as well, including strikes on military targets specifically within the territory of the Republic of Belarus. And this can be avoided.
And it seems that no one wants to avoid involving Belarusians in the war more than Lukashenko himself. And that's understandable. After all, as the military joke, if that happens, he will become the second legitimate target after Putin.
I think he is well aware that he doesn't have a bunker deep enough to guarantee that, as they say, nothing will reach him, especially considering that by 2026, the means will be much more effective than they were in 2022.
The Belarusian military leadership is also wary of a possible Ukrainian response. Not only is the local command generally unwilling to fight against the Ukrainian armed forces, as they have demonstrated repeatedly, but being knowledgeable in military affairs, they clearly understand how this would end for them.
I think that in Belarus, the entire military leadership, including the political leadership, clearly sees and knows, looking at the examples of how we act against military targets on the territory of the Russian Federation, what could happen in Belarus. There is an understanding of this. It has been illustrated and demonstrated more than once.
Therefore, even if Putin does manage to pressure Lukashenko, sabotage among the military cannot be ruled out. The cannons and tanks could simply be turned toward Minsk and finish what couldn't be accomplished during the protests in the year 2020.
Right now near Zaporizhzhia, it is hell for occupiers and a historic breakthrough for the AFU. Our troops are burning out the Russian army, something just made Putin's generals' blood run cold. The Ukrainian armed forces struck a precise, powerful blow right to the gut unexpectedly. Details next.
A total of just over 30 square kilometers in almost a month of intense and fierce combat operations, this represents the final result of the Russian army's offensive actions throughout May. The pace of the Russian army's advance has dropped to its lowest levels in the past 2 years. Even the most die-hard pro-war military bloggers have started to admit the stalemate at the front.
Some settlements have been mentioned in reports for so long that their names have become proverbial. With the front line unchanged, the area around it gradually turns into a completely targeted and devastated zone. Since attacking in columns of vehicles has become impractical under such conditions, the troops have switched to assaulting in small infantry groups. Their task is to infiltrate through positions, with stealth being the key feature. However, this tactic no longer works as it did before. Largely because of this, the front has simply stalled in most areas, and the Russian offensive has effectively come to a halt.
Even military bloggers have started making memes. For example, the village of Malotokmashka in the Zaporizhzhia region, which Russia has been trying to capture for over a year now, all to no avail.
Assault groups have now begun retreating from Malotokmashka. I couldn't do it, I just couldn't per results.
There is a resource that is, in a way, an analog of the Ukrainian mapping service Deep State, a pro-Russian resource called Slivochny Kapris. What sets them apart is that they often present a more optimistic assessment than the consensus among many analysts. In other words, they mark as under Russian control those territories where, for now, only assault troops with flags have appeared, and in reality, it's actually a gray zone. So even according to their data, with their more optimistic assessments, it turns out that May is ending with almost a negative figure in terms of Russia's rate of advance.
Some military analysts believe that the Russian army's offensive has not yet begun. For now, the Kremlin is amassing its forces, and that's why there are no changes at the front. But even if such a breakthrough does happen, it won't end well for the Kremlin.
Right now, they are preparing for such an offensive, redeploying forces, trying to scrape together some reserves, and in some places they're already attacking. For the Kremlin, this offensive will be its last chance. But judging by the current strength of the Ukrainian armed forces and the abundance of drones, the Russian army's offensive will only lead to its defeat. Jan Matviv, military analyst.
In terms of the intensity and number of attacks, May and June are widely seen as the most convenient and productive months for offensive operations. But as we can see, not only is the Russian army not advancing, in some sectors of the front it is even retreating.
If June turns out to be exactly the same as May, this is a very clear sign that, as far as the war is concerned, things have gotten exceptionally dire and problematic for the Russian army, and the pace has dropped almost to a complete standstill during the very months when there should be significant strategic breakthroughs.
A deadlock on the front for the Russian army is the main message being conveyed by Russian war correspondents. The main reason for zero progress is unanimously cited by all experts as the quantitative and technological leap of the Ukrainian armed forces in the use of drones and the quality of communications.
Losses in the Russian armed forces have begun to exceed recruitment. Ukraine has made a leap in technology, as well as in the quantity and range of drone use, from frontline to long-range drones. The reality is that the Russians are facing difficulties on the front, and things are not going very well for them. Lawrence Friedman, Professor of War Studies at King's College London.
The war has changed significantly this year. That's true. We can see that right now Ukrainian forces are of exceptionally high quality. For example, they significantly outperform the Russians when it comes to drones. And as we remember, drones in this war are the main means of striking. About 80 to 90% of losses on both sides are caused by drones. Not from missiles, not from aerial bombs, but specifically from drones. And although there is parity in numbers, the qualitative advantage is on Ukraine's side, especially when it comes to communication quality. That is, Ukraine still has Starlinks, while Russia no longer does.
Experts also tend to believe that the chances of Russia using tactical nuclear weapons are close to zero. these are just more scare tactics, since the situation at the front is not in favor of the occupying forces.
Shock! What our drone forces did has thrown the Russian general staff into horror. The scorching swarm of Ukrainian drones broke through vaunted air defenses and officially nullified the Kremlin's untouchable sites. The Russian deep rear has suffered a terrifying crack. It's heating up all over Russia, from Voronezh to Tuapse.
Good morning, so to speak.
For the fifth time this spring, the Tuapse oil refinery has been hit by the Ukrainian armed forces.
Unbelievable. A missile hit. 2 missiles, actually.
Explosions were heard at night in Taganrog as well. A facility involved in the repair and modernization of Russian military aviation was successfully attacked. The morning didn't go well on the peninsula in the annexed Sevastopol and Simferopol. At the Yedynya oil refinery, they report strikes on the Baltimore military air base in Voronezh.
So much for a good morning.
In Simferopol, according to reports from propagandists, a missile hit the building of the Southern Directorate of the Central Bank.
In the area of Gogol Street, according to preliminary reports, a missile also damaged an administrative building that had not been used for a long time.
But the actual target was the headquarters of the Black Sea Fleet Air Force on that same Gogol Street. But no photos or videos from there are currently being shown. Only local residents are sharing information online.
Oh. Whoa, oh.
In Sevastopol, a strike hit the headquarters building of the Black Sea Fleet Air Force. Part of Gogol Street in Sevastopol, near the Air Force headquarters, has been closed to traffic.
The occupied part of Donetsk region also lost important facilities for the enemy.
What happened?
Locals saw a bright glow in the sky and heard loud explosions in Donetsk and Makivka. Ukraine has turned the logistics of the Russian Federation's troops into a real hell.
Something is already starting to happen, huh? They've already completely blown it up.
Major supply routes in the occupied areas of Ukraine have come under fire from the Ukrainian armed forces.
Wow, oh, that is absolutely hilarious.
Yeah.
Our military defenders are currently focusing their strategic attention on the land corridor that links Russia with Crimea, through the occupied territories.
Another drone caught a vehicle again.
We're talking about the Rostov-Mariupol-Melitopol-Jankoy route. This route plays an important role for the occupiers in transferring equipment, ammunition, fuel, and personnel of the Russian army. But as we can see, the Kremlin's plans have been disrupted.
Everything is going according to plan, just according to plan. Right on schedule.
Movement along certain sections of the highway is significantly complicated due to the constant threat of strikes. Meanwhile, dissatisfaction among Russian military bloggers is growing. They accuse collaborators of being unable to ensure the stable operation of logistical routes.
Hornet kamikaze drones are now flying more than 150 kilometers from the front line, reaching the Veselo-Voznesenka checkpoint on the administrative border between the DPR and Rostov region.
Under attack, this category encompasses all enemy equipment, specialized cargo trucks, fuel tankers, strategic fuel and lubricant storage depots, and the vital transport hubs used to supply and maintain Russian military units across the region. And there is already an effect. The Russian Federation is already preparing restrictions on fuel exports.
You drive through Melitopol and there's absolutely no gas anywhere.
The Kremlin is considering a ban on the export of diesel and kerosene after a series of attacks.
Hooray.
Hooray! The goal of our military is to complicate the delivery of resources to the line of contact and to increase the strain on the enemy's supply system. If the strikes continue to intensify, which is now appearing to be unavoidable, The supply of fuel, essential goods, and logistical support to Russian forces along the entire southern section of the front could be placed at a very serious risk. Meanwhile, the Ukrainian armed forces are confidently clearing Ukrainian land of the Russian world.
Urgent, NATO's iron cage has slammed shut around Kaliningrad at this very moment. Panic has broken out in Putin's bunker. The first fatal explosion has indeed occurred. Could it be that the Ukrainian armed forces are also launching a major offensive on the side of the alliance? What Putin feared most has begun. Details to follow.
Is NATO preparing an invasion? Up to 60,000 troops could be deployed to Russia's borders. Against the backdrop of the war in Ukraine and renewed mobilization rhetoric in the Kremlin, there is increasing talk in Europe about the possible expansion of the conflict. NATO countries are indeed strengthening the eastern flank. Germany and the Netherlands are forming separate command structures to defend Latvia and Estonia. This is about a new defense architecture designed to reduce response time in the event of a crisis.
So, as we can clearly see, NATO countries are actively implementing a series of preventive measures to avoid any potential future scenarios of a direct invasion of the Baltic states by Russian troops. At the moment, these efforts are being significantly and maximally intensified by both the military and political leadership of the United States and their European partners.
An additional cause for concern is the possible reduction of the American military presence in Europe. The United States plans to withdraw part of its contingent from Germany, which is about 5,000 troops. But is everything really as it is being portrayed?
Initially, Trump's statements were met with a great deal of skepticism, as if they would supposedly weaken the defensive capabilities of NATO countries. But in reality, what is actually happening is the redeployment of American troops, practically to the very border with the Russian Federation. What is meant is that the Republic of Belarus is viewed by the Russian Federation as a zone of its own military political influence.
Meanwhile, Kremlin playbooks continue. Their rhetoric regarding Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia is growing harsher.
In such circumstances, a retaliatory strike will be inevitable. And yes, Madam Permanent Representative of Latvia, the Russian Foreign Intelligence Service has stated that the coordinates of decision-making centers on Latvian territory are well known, and that the country's NATO membership will not protect the accomplices of terrorists from just retribution.
Special attention was drawn to a new law signed by the bunker dweller. It expands the grounds for using the Russian army abroad under the pretext of protecting Russian citizens. But we've heard this somewhere before.
As a matter of fact, this is a very clear and direct reference to the Baltic countries and the post-Soviet states. This represents the legal legitimization of a potential future direct military invasion into the sovereign territory of former Soviet republics. Moreover, this concerns not only the Baltic states, but also, accordingly, Belarus, Kazakhstan, and Moldova, and accordingly, the countries of the South Caucasus as well. These are the former Soviet republics of Azerbaijan and Armenia.
But it's not just about Putin's threats. Kaliningrad, which is so important to Putin and surrounded by NATO countries, is also being mentioned more and more often in the rhetoric of European countries.
We need to demonstrate to the Russians that we can break through into their little fortress that they've built in Kaliningrad. NATO has the necessary means to, if it becomes necessary, completely level Russian air defense bases and missile bases there.
For the first time, there's an alert in Kaliningrad. Has it really happened? A preemptive NATO strike? But no, for now the alert was declared due to the threat of drones.
The strategic territory of the Kaliningrad region is undergoing a significant process of militarization by the Russian Federation. Additional multiple launch rocket systems have been stationed within the region, as well as S-400 air defense systems, and in addition, various operational tactical complexes. For the Russian Federation, Kaliningrad serves as a critical strategic stronghold in its ongoing confrontation with NATO countries. It is precisely control over the Kaliningrad region that allows the Russian Federation to exert pressure over the entire Baltic region.
Despite the increase in rhetoric and military preparations, Western intelligence agencies emphasize that there are currently no signs of Russia making immediate preparations for a direct attack on NATO countries.
Nevertheless, certain Russian activities are being observed at our borders, surveillance and provocations. We had observed such dangerously irresponsible and reckless behavior in the Baltic Sea and in our airspace well before the events of 2022. Russia is also exerting significant strategic pressure through migrants at our border, and they are definitely actively setting their sights on much broader activities, including sabotage and intimidation. But what is happening, in my opinion, only demonstrates Russia's weakness.
The situation remains tense but under control, with no signs of escalating into open conflict. But is that really the actual case?
A coordinated missile and long-range drone strike could potentially be carried out on the territory of the sovereign Baltic nations. That is, specifically without a ground component. Given the Russians' significant and overwhelming strategic advantage in strike capabilities, this scenario is the most, plausible and realistic outcome. In addition, up to 5,000 Wagner PMC personnel are concentrated on the territory of the Republic of Belarus.
At present, Europe does not see signs of an imminent Russian attack on NATO countries, but they do not completely rule out such a scenario either. At the same time, they admit that the Kremlin might try to test the alliance's readiness and unity against the backdrop of a protracted war and political instability in the EU. What is NATO itself seriously preparing for? A deranged Putin has announced a nuclear end to the war. The paranoid leader has gone all in and declared a doomsday scenario. But Russian missiles have started destroying Russia. A massive tech collapse, the disgrace with Sarmat and Oreshnik missiles continue. What should we expect next? Watch for the shocking details.
Instead of peace and negotiations with Ukraine, the Kremlin chooses nuclear blackmail and a new round of escalation.
Shout it out loudly, so that they can definitely hear you. Give them a triple hooray, ja. Let's hear it 3 times. Hooray, hooray, hooray.
The target audience for this nuclear saber-rattling is the West. The Speaker of the Russian State Duma, Vyacheslav Volodin, has taken to directly threatening Elon Musk with the destruction of human civilization.
That same Elon Musk himself really needs to understand that his satellites are being used in these conflict zones to kill innocent children. His carefully maintained public persona and respectable image do not at all match what is actually happening on the ground. All of this could eventually lead to us using catastrophic weapons that would leave absolutely no trace of anyone at all behind.
In addition to Volodin's words and Medvedev's angry posts, the Russian authorities are trying to back up their threats with actions. The nuclear exercises in Belarus, as well as the third launch of the Oreshnik against Ukraine, are links in a single propaganda chain that, according to its creators, the West is supposed to believe in.
When the Russian military chooses to deploy the Oreshnik, it is essentially sending a very clear message. You see for yourselves what could happen if the Oreshnik were to be used with strategic nuclear warheads.
At the same time, the Russian Foreign Ministry is urging diplomats to evacuate from Kiev. Lavrov repeats the same thing in a personal conversation with Marco Rubio. Moscow is relying on past experience when the US responded to threats from Russia. For example, when addressing Musk, the Kremlin remembers that previously the billionaire disabled Starlink during Ukrainian attacks on occupied Crimea.
Putin is trying to influence what is called the Western mentality. We are discussing with our partners that we should not give in to Russian blackmail. The world's response should be proportionate, and that means additional aid packages and more sanctions. Putin must understand that he will achieve nothing by military means.
But the Kremlin elders are overlooking one important factor. For the 5th year, Ukraine has been showing the whole world in practice there is no need to fear Putin's nuclear club. You can blow up FSB headquarters, set fire to the largest oil refineries, sink the fleet, and destroy strategic aviation, and the sky won't fall to the ground.
The strategy of intimidation is only effective for the first month. And this holds true for both the local population in any country at war and for the allies of that country. This is a widely recognized historical fact, because by the 5th year, war inevitably becomes routine.
Prominent military experts and strategic analysts strongly emphasize another important detail. Before using nuclear weapons, the Kremlin would need nuclear tests with an actual full-scale bomb detonation. Not just the theater of launching more dummies in Belarus.
With your permission.
Please follow the procedure. How will you be afterwards?
Yes, sir. To the battalion commander on target 10201. Readiness 1.
The main result of Russia's nuclear blackmail is its complete devaluation. The old man wants to scare everyone with his nuclear club, but the world no longer falls for the lies of the Russian Führer.
Russia has fought itself into complete collapse. What happened at the State Duma session threw the entire Putin elite into a state of terror. They can no longer hide the black hole in Russia's treasury. The system has hit financial rock bottom. There is total panic in the Kremlin. There is no more money for the war. See the details. They have completely mismanaged the situation. Members of the State Duma are using obscene language to describe the Russian budget. We're talking about Valery Gartung, the chairman of the State Duma Committee on Competition Protection, who described the growing hole in the federal budget.
Well, let's take a moment to really look at the situation, Kabak. So what exactly are we going to do about this massive federal budget deficit? Last year, we had more than $5 trillion, and now it's almost another $5 trillion more. So in total, that's already reaching about $11 trillion. What are we going to do about this? Are we just going to print more money like we did back in 1992, when prices went up by 30% every single week?
Gartung asks his colleagues what should be done in the current situation and puts forward his own proposal to collect money where it actually is, in natural monopolies and in the raw materials and financial sectors.
The total expenditure side of the Russian budget has currently increased by 16%. These are record figures. This serves as clear evidence that the Russian economy has actually and significantly overheated. The only source of continuously replenishing the Russian treasury involved the direct sale of oil and petroleum products to end consumers, and currently, at this very moment, the Russian Federation has been compelled to significantly scale back production, not refining but specifically oil extraction, to exactly 400,000 barrels per day. These are record-breaking figures for the decline in oil production since the coronavirus period. The primary explanation for the decline in Russian oil production, according to the Russian side itself, are the highly effective and successful attacks by Ukrainian drones on the largest oil refineries located deep within the territory of the Russian Federation.
A bit later, Valery Hartung commented on his emotional speech and assured everyone that there was no foul or offensive language in it.
Valery Hartung, deputy of the State Duma of the Federal Assembly of the Russian Federation, there was absolutely no foul language at all. Why would there be? What kind of foul language could there be? No, that's impossible. That's out of the question. There are no such words in my vocabulary. Maybe someone else might slip up if they have those words in their vocabulary, but I don't.
As of April, Russia's budget deficit increased to a record 5.9 trillion rubles, or 2.5% of GDP. Not even oil revenues boosted by the war in the Middle East managed to save the situation.
It is important to remind you that 40% of the Russian budget is heavily dependent upon foreign currency earnings, which come specifically from the sale of oil, gas, and other fossil resources. The Russian Federation has in fact continued to function as a raw materials appendage, considering the significant fact that China has formally declined to cooperate with the Russian Federation in building the second line of the Power of Siberia 2 gas pipeline. Russia's overall ability to diversify its sales of its natural gas and crude oil resources either to China or to other global consumers has effectively plummeted down to almost zero.
Even though Russia manipulates the real economic figures to convince Ukraine's Western allies that the Russian economy has withstood military expenses and Western sanctions, the situation for Russians is far from ideal. To cover the budget deficit, the Bank of Russia has sold almost 22 tons of gold since the beginning of 2026, and the year 2026 itself is being called the point of no return for the Russian economy. That's all for now. But you can catch more breaking news from the front in the next episode.